Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Steve Heiser calling in from Milwaukee County Federated Library System. Today we're going to talk about Create Lists, an introduction to Create Lists, which is a reporting tool that is used in Sierra and in its previous version, Millennium. So before we get too far, we're probably got a few more people are going to join us during the course of the presentation here, but since your time is valuable, we're going to move forward. So the first thing I'd like to do is talk about what our agenda is going to be for today. First of all, we're going to talk about briefly what Create List is, what its purpose is in Sierra. Talk a little bit about the things to know before you begin, before you even start searching, the types of things that you need to think about. New for this year are the additions with Sierra, of which there are a few. I mean, not terribly a lot, but there's enough here to make it worth your while to actually take note of. And then the majority of the presentation we're going to spend creating a list. We're going to walk through the whole process, looking at all the various conditions and operators that you can use in setting up your list. There's quite a bit to look at in that area. We'll also take a look at outputting information. Generally speaking, nowadays you're going to be exporting information to Excel, and then you can start working with all the things in Excel to really make your data pop a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about the MCFLS master lists, do a few exercises, and then wrap up the presentation. Since there's so few of us on the call right now, feel free to chime in if you have any questions or anything else that you would like to raise. If something's not clear or there's technical issues, feel free to just let me know. And you can also use the chat interface on the bottom of your GoToMeeting client. It should be in the bottom there where it says type message here. You can type something into either myself or the entire audience, and then we can address it there as well. So that being said, one other thing before we get too far in, I wanted to point out that there is a website, it should be on your screen right now, for Create Lists and Statistics training. I've spent the last week or two upgrading all the information on here to be relevant with Sierra, including the PowerPoint slides we're going to show today. They're on Google Drive, as well as some of the other information we're going to talk about. All of the examples that we had in previous sessions are also here, and these are all updated with Sierra screenshots and newer examples that make sense. There might be some other information here like the statistics that need to be upgraded yet, but this information is all new for the most part, including the 40 or 50 page Create List manual. If you click on this link here for PDF, by the way, the address is www.mcfls.org/createlists. You can see that hopefully at the top. Create Lists, all one word. If you click on the PDF link here, you'll get this PDF file that is basically a complete walkthrough with all new screenshots of Sierra. I've updated some of the information to be more relevant, but you'll see a complete walkthrough for creating a list and all the different options that you have at your disposal. So hopefully that you'll find that useful, and you can share that with other staff. Okay, so there's also a space in the staff area of MCFLS.org underneath continuing education. We're making a recording of this particular presentation, and we're going to put that up in that area. It's under the staff area under continuing education. So first up on the agenda here is what is Create Lists? I think I've used this description for many, many years. It's a powerful report generator. In actuality, it's really nothing more than a utility that can collect record numbers. The powerful part of it is that you can use criteria of all different sorts and operators to link those criteria so that you get the correct record numbers to appear. Whether they're patron record numbers, item record numbers, or bib record numbers, whatever you're searching for, you'll be able to collect those record numbers into a list that makes sense, and then you can export the data from those records into something like Excel so you can use it elsewhere. In most cases, it's used as a management tool. A lot of folks you'll see if you're involved in database maintenance, CERC. It's a tool that allows you to correct records that may be coded in error. For example, have a misspelling of some sort. It's just a way to maintain records and, as a result, the database integrity. So that's in a nutshell what create lists is. It's actually on the back end. I've noticed now that we have Sierra for a while, there is a SQL back end, or I don't know if maybe you may not be familiar with SQL, but it's a database tool, and create lists really kind of works in conjunction with that database back end to collect those records. But that's just an aside. So before you begin, before you even start putting together your list, your review file, you'll hear that term used often by me and others to refer to a create list file. It's also called a review file. Before you even get started with that, you have to take into account some pieces of information so that you can create your review file successfully or in the correct way. First of all, we need to talk about the file assignments for MCFLS. And for those of you who have participated in this presentation before, not much has changed in this area. I'm going to go actually click on one of these lists here. It's insert D05. This is in the knowledge base. In general, every library location has been assigned 2 review files for use and reserved for those libraries. One of 5,000 max records and another of 20,000 max records. We've had problems in the past with other libraries kind of swatting or using review files that don't belong to them. And as much as we talk about it pretty much every quarter when we clean out review files, some people still do that. They'll just choose the first review file. What I've found is useful, and some libraries have done this. I'm going to go take a look at review files here. You'll notice that, for example, Hale's Corners has they have an empty file. There's no records in it, but they've just used the words Hale assigned file. Greenfield has done the same. This one has actually got 1,285 records in it, but you get the idea. They're basically putting something in, renaming that file so that other people don't use it. It's a smart move and just dissuades other people from thinking that's just an empty file that they can just use. In addition to the files that are available for everyone to use, the 2 files that are assigned to each library, MPL Central for tech processing has been assigned 16 files, MCFLS 13. We don't get too hung up in these as much. MPL Central, using those 16 files are pretty important. Those are often always full. There are other files below here that you can see as well. So that's the one insert, and that's also available here on Create List Resources. You'll see this County Cat Manual Insert D05, file assignments for each library. So if you ever need to get back to that information, you know where to find it. Okay, and a real important part of dealing with the information in Create Lists is trying to think logically about the information that you need to get out. I've often thought of searching with create lists is similar to using a Venn diagram. And I'm an old philosophy major, so I know what those things are. So if you don't, you're in luck because you're going to find out exactly what I'm talking about. In most cases, what you can do with create lists is break down the statement logically about the information that you're trying to find. So for example, I'm going to just jump over to this slide here. So here's a sample statement from perhaps a staff member at Oak Creek trying to find Oak Creek DVD and CD items added to the database since the beginning of 2014, which is something similar to what you may need to find for your own library. You can just substitute Oak Creek for whatever library you're from. So what we have here is a Venn diagram kind of breaking up those elements of that statement. So you have one circle for items added to the database since the start of 2014. That could be anybody's items, but as long as they were added since the start of 2014, that's that set of items in the kind of the darker color. The lightish green color is all of the Oak Creek items, and those could be of any age as long as they are owned by Oak Creek. And then DVD or CD items in the database that are of any age and belonging to any library, but are owned, but have to be DVD or CD items. So what you get here is this area here in the middle where all of those sets kind of come together. So you're putting an and between all these statements. They're owned by Oak Creek, and they're DVD and CD items, and they were added since the beginning of 2014. So what you end up with is a set here in the middle, a very small set because we've ANDed all of these together that represent what your item is going to look like. So what it ends up being is that you just have to break up your statement or your query into logical sets that the computer knows what to do with. That doesn't make any sense, feel free to let me know. It's kind of a difficult concept, but once you get used to searching or thinking this way, thinking in a way in which Sierra can take that information that you have and get the correct set of items, the better off you're going to be, the less frustrating you'll be to deal with create lists. Go back to our other slide here. So once you have a good handle on the information that you need to determine what size file that you're going to need. Obviously, if you're searching on, for example, I need all of the Greenfield item records added since in the entire database, you're going to need a larger file in, say, 5,000 max records. And those are listed here. You can always tell what max records are available in a review file by this column here for max records. So using this file for 5,000 max records is not going to do you any good if you're searching for the entire number of Greenfield item records, or for that matter patron records, anything like that. Large numbers are going to require a larger max record review file. However, the opposite holds true too. If you're searching for like a patron record number, a particular phone number, something of that, where it's only a couple records that could possibly match your criteria, you're not going to want to choose the 50,000 max record review file. You're going to want to choose the 1,000, or if it's available, there are some that are as small as 500. I'm not sure if I can scroll all the way down here. Yeah, there's some here that are 500. These are meant for those type of searches where you're only going to find a few records. It gets frustrating sometimes when you need a really large review file and there's only a few records in it that somebody has done in the past. Okay, so once you've determined the size of file that you're probably going to need to use, the next important thing is the record format you're storing. And we'll just go into a review file real quickly and show you what I'm talking about. We'll choose an empty review file, click on Search Records. We can type our name, but that's we're just going to get rid of this quickly because I just want to show you here. This area here for Store Record Type, that basically determines the type of records that are going to be in your list, whether they're bibliographic record numbers, items, patrons, orders, so on and so forth. This really is important because it determines what type of information you can get out of Sierra. You can export out of Sierra. And this, jump back to our appendix here. This comes down to something that we've talked about for years here called the law of one hop when dealing with create lists. The law of one hop dictates that you can only extract information from Sierra where there are links between your stored record type and the information you're trying to retrieve. So if our stored record type is bibliographic records, for example, this blue area right here, we can extract information from bibs, orders, items, and check-in records, for example. We cannot, however, there is no direct link between bibliographic records and patron records, so we are limited to what we can get out of Sierra because of this law of one hop. So let's go back to our create list window here. Our stored record type is bibliographic items. If we start searching on information, you'll notice that these are the field or record types that I'm limited to searching off of. You'll notice that there are no patron record. There's no patron record listed here because I cannot link. There's no link to patron records from bibliographic records. However, if I change this to patron records, let's just go back to our screenshot here. My patron record, that's my stored record type. I can search on patron record information and item record information. So if we go back here and we double click on type here again, you'll notice that those two now show up. So this stored record type really determines the type and the amount of information that you can get out of Sierra. And that's important. I see this become a problem mostly with bibliographic and item stored record types. People may store item record information and or bibliographic record information when what they want to use is the item record information. One thing that complicates create list searching is that there is a one-to-many relationship between bibliographic records and item records. And that creates a problem when you're trying to do searches like your stored record type is bibliographic records, but you're trying to do a search for item status equal to lost and paid. What this means, and this is kind of an important thing to recognize, it's going to store records, bibliographic records in your review file, but in order to match, to store that bibliographic record, all it has to do is find one item that has a status of lost and paid. It doesn't have to be all of the items having the status of lost and paid in order for it to be captured by this review file. Just one item has to match this criteria in order for it to be captured. So there's a one-to-many relationship because there's only one bib record, but there could be many item records that match the criteria. It only has to match one in order for it to be captured, and that's a source of a lot of confusion, frustration with create lists. I'm going to close this out, go back to the area here. Okay, so we've talked about these other areas here. Before we get into actually doing the search, I wanted to talk about getting familiar with the Create Lists window and some of the other options here on the page. So if we go into Sierra here, we'll open up our Create List window again. Those of you who are familiar with Millennium and the way it looked there, there's not a whole lot of difference here between Millennium and Sierra. The biggest difference is that the tabs that used to be near the top of the screen along, if you can follow my cursor, there used to be tabs along the top here that used to indicate all these buttons on the left-hand side of the screen. So review files, save searches, all that stuff used to be in tabs along the top. As with most of Sierra, everything's along the left-hand side now. All these buttons, or these tabs, I guess you could call them, are along the left-hand side of the screen. But in most cases, everything is the same. Your buttons to start searching on records, sorting, listing, exporting, all that information is at the top of the screen. This is kind of how you get started with working with the review file. So search records is your entry point into creating a review file. And we'll look at that in a second. And we'll also examine the others down here. There's also a list of buttons here at the top. And this has been scaled down a little bit somewhat because there's a slight difference between Millennium and Sierra in terms of the fact that you'll notice that there is no more suspend or resume buttons on the toolbar here. We have the ability to append to an existing review file, dedupe, copy. All those commands are the same, but you'll notice that suspend and resume are no longer there. And instead what we have instead of stop is a cancel button. So that's a major difference between what we had before and what we have now. Let's see. There's also, and a lot of people don't realize this, there's a drop-down menu here underneath the, where it says all, where you can actually filter the review files, and it becomes useful when you're trying to find an empty review file. Say, for example, majority of the files are already filled. You can find the empty ones by clicking on that drop-down menu and then clicking on empty. And then you'll find all of the empty files, including the ones that we discussed before where they're actually assigned. But there are other ones down below here, in fact some larger ones that are empty in this case. You can also see those that are in progress. Currently we have none. And those that are complete. The limited area is something that we don't use. But it's, let's see if anything pops up there. Well, I guess it does. I'm sorry. If we take a look, yeah, I don't think that really works the way it's intended. But in any case, you can use this to find the empty ones, those in progress. For example, if you have a list that you ran and you weren't quite sure what number you were using, you can you'll find it using that drop-down. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides. Okay, before we get too far into creating our file, our review file, I wanted to talk about the new additions with Sierra. There are quite a few here. Some of them are, some of this is new information, others we have discussed in when the Sierra sessions took place back in April. First of all, there are new fields for holds and finds. We'll take a quick look at those. In order to see them, you actually have to open up a review file, create a review file. And these are, there are new fields, or new fields for bibliographic, item, and patron records. So we can use a stored record type of bib to see all, well, most of them. Let's see, I think we use item here. For example, if we take a look at the item, our item type, searching that type of record, and then double-clicking on the field area, you'll see new tabs here for holds and finds. And there's some real powerful stuff here. You can find, this is something that I've used quite a bit already, whether or not a hold is frozen. So it's looking at it from the item perspective. Who the patron is that actually has the hold. The hold location, when the hold was placed, when it expires, and the hold status. The one that might be useful for many people is the hold pickup location. You can find out what holds are out there for pickup at your particular library, if that's something you need to find. The other set of fields that were just added are those for finds. So this is a lot of information that you may find in the finds paid file, but is now accessible in Create Lists. So you find out when the fine was assessed, the item charge, the paid date. It's important if you're going to look for information. The initials, description, and a lot of dates. You know, when was it due, a return date, the loan rule used. A lot of information related to fines here that we did not have access to prior to Sierra, so that's all brand new. So this is located when you do an item, stored record type of item, and looking at item records. If I look at bibliographic records, the only thing that shows up here that's new, all of this is the same as Millennium, are the holds. So all that hold information, this is looking at bibliographic holds rather than the item holds that we just looked at. So, but most of the same information here, whether it's frozen, status, that type of thing, all that stuff is the same. We change it to patron. Again, we have two new tabs here for holds and finds, all of which are the same. So it's, instead of looking at it from the item perspective, we're looking at it from the patron. So what finds they have on their record, you can do it that way. So there's a different whole set of new fields that we can use to trap the correct records that we're after. There are also two new operators, exist and not exist, for date fields. So what I mean by that is if we do another search records here and we go to item, just going to use due date as an example here. Instead of using equal to nothing, you can use exist or not exist. So it's lower e or lower n, lowercase n. And instead of using due date equal to nothing, you can use due date not exist. And that's important because there are current issues with blank dates. So if you did a file with just item due date equal to nothing, it's going to create an error message here because there is an unknown issue with this. So let's just go ahead and try, because I think it's going to tell me if my search can't proceed here. Put a statement here. Okay, so this is the error message that you'll see right now when you try to do an item, a due date or any kind of date field equals nothing. When you try to do that type of search, then you're going to have problems. And you will get this error message before it goes too far, and then we'll just wipe out your search. So if we do that same search now with item due date not exist, which is basically the exact same search that we were doing, and do a search it should give us basically the, I'm up to 50,000 for obvious reasons. There's a lot out there sitting on the shelves without due dates, so that's basically what you're looking at. So if we look at summary here, you'll see our due date does not exist, and that's basically what you would want to find. Obviously, you would do a different search, but that's basically the gist of it. Empty this out. The last thing I wanted to talk about with regard to new additions with Sierra is the browse query. The browse query is new to Sierra. It's something we did not have in Millennium. And in order to use browse query, you have to be either in catalog mode or search holds mode, either one of those two. And everyone should have catalog mode on their machines. We had to put that in for the browse query to work, as well as for other purposes. But you should be able to find one of those two functions here on your list. So if we go to catalog mode, browse query is underneath the tools menu. So if you go to tools and then browse query, it brings up something that looks like a create list window, and in actuality it's very similar. In fact, you can use existing create list searches or retrieve saved queries into a browse query, but a browse query is totally different than create lists. With create lists, you can save your list of records in basically forever. With browse query, you're basically browsing the database like you would do a title search or a patron name search of some sort. It's using that same logic, and it's leveraging the create list granularity and the ability to search on specific fields, but in actuality it's just searching the database, and it'll be gone as soon as you move away from this window. So if we did a quick search for, this is great if you're using it for finding patron telephone numbers, any field that isn't indexed, it works great for that type of thing. So if we change this to, we'll just keep it at the range of records here, and just do a patron email search. Do something like, so hopefully it would find a few records here. Patron email address has mclist.org. You would probably put in something more specific than that because you're going to find everybody's domain here. But if we do a quick search here, yeah, it's just searching against the database quickly, and it's not, this is interesting. There's probably records in here. Let's see, let's just take a look at some of these. Okay, so a lot of these are Franklin reference. They're doing something special with these records. But in any case, it did a really quick search of the database, looking for that specific phrase in the patron email area, and it basically just listed all the records. So, and you can edit these records if you want. You can make changes to anything. But as soon as you hit this close button or move off of this screen, your search is gone. There is no saving records with this. It's just a real ephemeral quick search against the database that you can use for quick searches like phone numbers, email addresses, a driver's license number, something of that sort that's not indexed in our current system. So it's really useful for that. Okay, so let's move on to actually creating a list. I think we're all done with this stuff here. So the first thing we're going to do, we're creating a review file, and a lot of this is, I'm going to just be working with the same example, I believe, in the PDF file, which is available here. A lot of that same information is going to be listed here, and starting on page 4, and we're going to be working through each one of these steps, or for the most part. So to create a review file, we'll choose file number 70 here. You want to highlight the review file that you want to use, and then click on Search Records here at the top. It's the only button that's going to be highlighted. Now this is one of those things I try to stress with each one of these sessions is we do have a naming convention that's used for naming review files, mostly for, well, it's for everyone's benefit, but it really helps me when I'm trying to clear out old review files every quarter. Pretty much around the first of the month, like we just did one, I think, in October, I'll clear out every review file that's older than 3 months. So in order to identify those files that are really old, what I'd like people to do is use a standard naming convention so I can find those and delete them fairly easily. That naming convention is located, again, underneath this create list file assignments for each library. If you look at the bottom of that screen, there is a set of instructions on how to do the naming convention. So there are 4 parts to it. One is your library, and it could be something like NSHO for North Shore, whatever you use that's going to describe your library in a fairly short way. Description of the file, a couple words, that's all we really need. The initials of the person creating the review file, and then the date, which is probably the most important. Whenever you omit this information or just put in some garbage for the review file name, that indicates to me that you don't want to retain this information for any length of time. I'll never delete anything that is younger than 3 months unless there's a special circumstance and you're using a review file that's really in need. I'll try to move it over someplace. But for the most part, I'll leave them out there. But as soon as that quarter is done, I'm going to be deleting files like that unless they're named properly. So in this case, we're going to be searching for Oak Creek DVD and CD items that were added to the database since the beginning of 2014. Okay, so we got our library name, CD, DVDs added since 2014. So it's our description, put in my initials, and then date the file. So, and again, our most important thing here is determining what stored record type we want. In this case, since we're really only after the Oak Creek items, we're going to be using item records. That's the easiest way to do this and find that information. So we're going to use our stored record type of items. That's what we want. We're going to look at the item record information. And then the next step here is once we determine that stored record type is to determine whether or not what subsection of the database we're going to be looking at. The default is to use the range indicator right here, which means you're looking at the entire section of the database, looking at the start and stop number. So this is the first record added to the database, item record added to the database, and this one here is the latest item record added to the database. You'll notice that if I wipe this out, if I just highlight it, wipe it out, and then hit I again, sometimes that number will change. It's dynamically regenerating the last number in the item record in the database, so we can get the latest number here all the time. The other options here, only one of which we'll discuss really today, is the review file. So if I select this option here, I can actually do my criteria against a existing review file. So if there's something out there, just say there's a Oak Creek list out there that I want to apply my criteria against, it's just going to be applying my search against those 183 items that are already in a review file. This is really good when you're, we use this method quite a bit when you're searching against MCFLS master list. And a really good example of that are the stale holds list that I create every Friday. You can apply a criteria for your library. So for example, if you just want to find Greenfield items or North Shore items, you can apply a very simple criteria against that stale holds list and create a new list based off of that. It makes it a lot simpler to deal with that type of data. You'll also notice that with these start and stop numbers, since I already kind of demonstrated this, these are editable. So I can change the start number and stop number for any of these searches that I'm using when I use this range drop-down, looking at the entire database. This comes in handy because we've developed another handout. I'm going to take a look at that here. Again, this is off of the same web page here. There's a link here for ranges of various record types by year. You can use this to shorten the length of time that your file has to be run against the database. So if we take a look at that insert, all of the, going back to 1998, we've been able to isolate record ranges basically by year. So if you're interested in anything from the start of 2014, which we are, we could easily copy this information and put it into our start range and find everything added since the beginning of the year. But this goes for bibs, patrons, and back in 2007 we added order information as well. So this is useful. It's just it was a bigger deal when we had older servers that took 4.5, 5 hours to run through the entire database, and you would just set your search and let it run. It was more vital to have these numbers back then because it would just cut down your waiting time in half. Now a search for the entire database takes maybe 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes at tops, and it's much quicker now, even with Sierra involved. So since I am going to be looking only at Oak Creek items added since the beginning of the year, I'm going to change my start number to use, take that period out, the first item record added in 2014. So you're starting with January 1 pretty much right here, and then your stop is the latest added this year. So it would be a good set to work with in terms of what you're after for 2014 items. So the rest of the statements that we're going to add, these criteria, are going to be related to limiting our set to Oak Creek items and also the material type to CDs or DVDs. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do, I wanted to kind of go through each of these operators quickly so we don't have to waste too much time on each one of these. But the first step that you have is to choose the type of information that you're after. So in our case, we need to limit our search to information in the item record. We're going to look at the item location. And we're going to use a field called item loc. There are other fields that you can use to limit your items to a particular library, but item loc is the most solid. You can also use the item region field, which is 127 here. We're going to be using 79. But I've noticed that in some cases the region field isn't input correctly, but item loc is tied to loan rules and is always pretty solid because those loan rules, you'll find errors pretty quickly if that item location is not correct. So those are the most reliable. And in this case, we would use a particular operator, and you may be tempted in some cases, and I see this a lot, in using the equal to operator to find items, limit items to your library. And while that looks tempting, what you need to use is the has operator. and that's indicated here. Has basically means contains. That's the Sierra word for contains. So the item load contains, and since Oak Creek is our library, we're going to put in 24. If you put in equals, this isn't going to work. What it's going to find is every item record that has the item log of 24 but nothing else. So it won't find 24A, won't find 24AF, won't find 24Y. For those that you from North Shore, you're going to use a different method to find your item locations, and that's because you're a single-digit location. So you would use the within condition for that. So use within, and you would use within 8A and 8ZZZ. That's pretty solid as well because it will find everything that starts with 8A, which is the first item location in your list, and the last, I don't even think we have an 8ZZZ, but it will find everything in between, including 8A, so that you can get an accurate picture of what your records look like. So at this point, what I'm going to do is take a break from doing this search. We'll return to this quickly, but I wanted to talk about these conditions. These are important because these really affect the type of records that come up in your search, and you can relieve a little bit of frustration dealing with this if you understand what's going on here. The first one I wanted to look at was equal to. Equal to is pretty obvious if you're looking for example, a specific patron residence equal to 8 or 14 or 16, whatever it is that you're looking for that has an exact one-to-one match. You'll notice that if I do equal to and I double-click on this value A area, it will find all of the item locations that are in the database. And then I can choose that one-to-one match. So if I'm after Center Street Adult, hit OK, I can do that. Now, if I change this, so it's finding a one-to-one match here. It has to exist somewhere in that database to be equal to it. If I change this to has, there is no one-to-one match. So if I start double-clicking in here, I don't have anything to work with. So I have to input the data here manually. So this is good for fixed-line field information like patron residence, money owed. If you're looking for exact one-to-one matches with values that we have, patron region field, item region field, that type of thing. It's really good for that. You can also test for the absence of a field. So if you're looking for coding errors, let's just say item updated equal to nothing or not exist, I guess in this case. That's not going to work. So, or let's just take another example here, or take a look at a patron record example. You want to find out, let's see, I think this would work with residence as well. So if you do patron residence equal to nothing and just leave that blank, you'll be able to find errors in your coding, since every patron record should have a residence field attached to it. So you can find errors in the coding is basically what I'm trying to say. There should be a residence field in every patron record, but if there isn't, you can find it by leaving this area, this value A, blank, and then you can find that information. Another example would be item iType equal to nothing. Every item in the database should have an iType associated with it, or else the loan rules basically don't work, and you're left with a one-day checkout that goes to $5, within a couple minutes. Basically, is what happens there. So that's a good way to find errors in your coding, is using the equal to nothing. Now, granted, there's an issue right now with equal to nothing using date fields. So your due date equal to nothing is not going to work right now. You would have to use not exist in order for that same search to work. On the opposite side of that spectrum is not equal to. So if I did a patron, let's just say residence field not equal to 1, I could run a list and find all of the patrons in the database that are not Milwaukee residents. So that'd be one example of how you could use that. It's also great, and I use this a lot, in finding things that are information that is there, but it doesn't matter what's in the field. The one that I commonly use is patron email not equal to nothing. So if I leave that blank, it's kind of like looking at the opposite side of this equal to nothing. If it's not equal to nothing, it means there's something in the field according to the logic used by the computer. So you could use this for any type of search where you're looking for content within a field, but it doesn't matter what it is. So I don't care what the email address is. I don't care if it's Gmail, Yahoo, whatever, Hotmail, AOL. As long as there's something in the field and it exists, I will find it using this criteria. And that's one I use quite a bit, just to find stuff in a field. Another one that I wanted to look at too are the kind of the greater than, less than conditions. So we have greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. These are all great for looking at numbers. So if you have fields like money owed, current checkout, total checkout, anything using a numeric content, anything with a number, basically, including money owed, which isn't in this case. So if you want to find all your patrons that owe more than $5, you could do this using that greater than condition. Same goes for less than, all those things. The one issue that we have with greater than is using them with dates. Let's use this one. I think this is the best example of this. Item due date, less than, okay, I'm going to see if anyone's awake out there. Can anyone chime in here and tell me why this might be a problem or it wouldn't work? You can even use the chat interface if you want. Okay, I'll make it easy on you. The reason that this search would not work and would get you a ton of records is that by using the computer's logic, this would find every due date with an actual date less than October 18th, 2014. But by its own logic, it's also going to include everything that doesn't have a due date at all. So anything that's checked shelves and does not have a due date would also be included in your search results, resulting in an inflated amount of records that wouldn't match what you're actually after. In order for that to work, you would have to use this other condition called within that we've already looked at, and your first date would be something that would be ridiculously far in the past. And in this case, I always use 1991 as kind of the start date, looking at a range of records, and then I look at the actual date that I'm after. So in this case, October 18, 2014. So what we have here are, it's going to find an actual due date between 1/1/91 and 10/18/2014. So looking at everything that's has a due date of over a month ago, for whatever reason that you need it for. And that will get you an accurate list of records to work with. We've already talked about has, that condition, which is really useful. It's just basically the same as contained. So as long as the phrase or the characters that you put in your value A column are matched somewhere in that field, for example, email has MCFLS.org, it will look for MCFLS.org as one of the parts of that email address in order for it to capture it in the list. Another useful one, especially for those records that use the same type of field, for example, name or address or note fields is a big one, is all fields don't have and at least one field doesn't have. So if we do this, all fields don't have, just use the, this is great for variable length fields such as the note field or a message field. I use this a lot when putting in our transit reports every 2 weeks. So what I'll do in that case is I'll choose item message, all fields don't have, something to the effect of November 18, 2014. And I have it actually string a list of these together because this is, the message field contains those in-transit messages, and every one of them has a date attached to it somewhere in the message itself. And they all have a very consistent date entry in them, so I can find those. And at least all fields don't have them capturing all of those fields. I don't want to find these item records that have that transit message in it, so I'm eliminating them by putting this line in there. So it's useful for note fields, message fields, anything where you've got more than one possible field. Like patron addresses are common, patron names, could be more than one patron name field in a record. That's the type of thing that you can find with that type of condition. And one last one I wanted to take a look at was starts with and ends with. So let's just take a look at, we'll use patron email again for this. So our patron email string, we could use starts with, meaning that the string has to start with a certain string of characters. So let's just say the email address that we're looking at starts with Steve. That's probably uncommon. You're not going to want to find that many records, and it really doesn't serve any purpose. But there's another option here for condition where it ends with, and that's the $sign here. And you can find, for example, every email address that ends with gmail.com or AOL.com or yahoo.com, and then find all those email addresses that have the field ending with that string of characters. So it doesn't have to be the entire email address. It could be just bits and pieces of it, and then you put that into your search criteria. And there's also the other ones here that we talked about before, exist and not exist. These are only useful for date fields and fixed fields, fixed date fields. So if we look at, for example, go back to expiration date here. Once you do a fixed field with a date in it, like expiration date, you'll find that these two conditions start popping up: exist and not exist. So if you're looking for errors in patron records where there should be an expiration date, every patron record should have an expiration date, you can do not exist. And then you can find the errors for your patrons. You would probably add a line, something to the effect of patron residence equal to 14. So that would find all your greenfield patrons without expiration dates, and you can then fix those based on whatever you want to do. Okay, so in our case here, I'm going to go back and kind of wipe out everything, start over. We're actually going to do our search here. So if we choose our item as our record type, that's the information we want to limit it by, and double click on field for item location, you'll notice I can either double click the field area and then choose 79 here, or I can actually type, if I know what the number is, I can type in 79 and it will go right to it. And then I can tab over or hit enter to go to the condition area. This is what I do a lot with create lists, is just tab over to the next spot, and then I can start typing in conditions right away. So our condition is has, and we're going to look for 24 and it's going to limit our search to Oak Creek items created in 2014. The last segment or part of this that we have to add are the actual material types. So to do that, you'll notice that there's a set of buttons here in the window that we're working with that say insert line or append line. An insert line, if my term here, number 1, is highlighted, it will put it in front of or on top of the current criteria statement. If I use append line, it's going to put it beneath the highlighted line, and I can just add it afterwards. So I'm going to use that one. So insert, append, pretty much the same thing. It's just where the new line is put in. I can also delete that line by choosing the delete option, or clear all and then clear all of my statements, which I'm not going to do right now. So the next step is the material types. So what we're going to do here, because I'm linked using our store record type of item, I can actually link to bibliographic records type information and use that to limit my search further. So in this case, if I double click the type area, I can use the bibliographic level information. So these are stored item records, but we're referencing the bibliographic record attached to it and limiting it by that information. So bibliographic, we're going to use the mat type equal to, and then I can use the up and down arrows to go up and down and find my mat type that I'm after. So the first one we're going to look for, find it, is DVD, which is H. And then we're going to append another line. We're going to change our operator here at the far left-hand corner and just change it from and to or. So we're looking for mat types equal to H or mat types equal to C. Mat type is 30 equal to C. And if you're ever wondering what these numbers, how these numbers are decided, you just double click on the space here and you'll see that there's a number in the upper left-hand corner for each of these sections here. And you just need to become acquainted with those numbers or letters, for example, E for edition, D for subject, and you can input those fairly quickly once you get the hang of it. Now, I've got all of the information I need to run my query. However, I need to do one more thing in order for this to actually work. And this is a source of some frustration for staff as well. And it comes down to the fact that the logic used by the computer, if I ran the search right now, it would look for, it would trap all or capture all items belonging to Oak Creek that had a mat type of DVD, and that would be fine. We would find all the Oak Creek DVD items. But then, using the logic used by the computer, it would find everything in the database, regardless of who owned it, that had a mat type, any item record that had a mat type of C, or the music CD. So it's not limiting it correctly. So what we have to do is use some of those old mathematical nesting techniques. In this case, in Sierra language, it's called grouping. So in order to group things together to make them collect the correct records, we have to highlight the lines that we want to group together. So we're just looking for mat types equal to H or C. It's usually an OR statement of some sort. I'm going to group those together, and what that forces Sierra to do is to run the query, the criteria in this, between the parentheses first, and then AND it to the item loc has 24 statement at the top. So it's like a mathematical function. You kind of do everything within the parentheses first and then work your way out. That's basically what's at work here. So this statement will actually work. We'll find every DVD, every CD in the system, and make sure that Oak Creek owns that item. It has to have an item loc of 24 in order for the item record to be captured. So we have a list of 50,000. This should actually work, and it's limited to those records created since the beginning of the year. So if we go ahead, we're going to do, in order to perform the search, we're going to click on Search here. You can, we'll talk about this in a sec, this other stuff. So let's go ahead and just perform that search. While the search is performed, you'll notice that at the top here, oh, it's already complete. You can see how quickly it goes through that database, particularly since we've limited it to 2014 items. So we've got a file here of 1,161 items. Didn't have a chance to show you this, but you'll notice that when our search was running and in progress, the status here was in progress in this area here, which is complete. But also we had the option to cancel the search in case our search was running out of control and getting way too many returns in terms of records. So if we take a look at these records, the easiest way to do that is to use the buttons at the top here and click on Show Records. You can actually show info too. If there's a problem with the results, you're thinking you've got way too many, you can always click on Show Info, and that will show you the criteria that you used, including your range of used within this review file. So you can see if there's any problems. Maybe you used the wrong operator, or there's a used equals instead of has. It's that type of thing that you can use Show Info for, and that will cut down your time, your frustration level, I should say. To show the records within the search to make sure that you got the correct ones, you can click on that button. Hopefully you can see that. And we'll just examine one of these here. So it looks like it's a sound recording, which is a good sign. Go to Summary here. And this is the highlight. We're just going to change this here. So there are record view properties. This is another thing that you may find useful. You can change your record view properties for, and this is everyone should have the ability to do this, by going to View, Record View Properties. And if you wanted to see like the item level information, you would click on Summary and then All or Item, whatever you'd like. Summary basically chooses the attached records, and then you can choose which area in the attached records you want to look at. I usually select All, apply and save. Now I hit OK and quit out of here. Once I open up this record now, it should go straight to the item record. So you'll see that Our item location has a 24 in it, which is great. It was created on January 7th, 2014, which is great. It's exactly what we're after. And our, if you look at the bibliographic mat type, it's C for music CD. So that's a perfect match here for what we were after. A couple of the things I wanted to look at before we get into looking at the output is the, if we go back to search records, say for example we had screwed something up and we used equals to 24 instead of has 24. If we highlight that search that we just did and click on search records, it will give us a warning that we're about to overwrite the contents of the review file. That's okay. Since we made a mistake, we're going to do it over again. And you'll notice it pops the review file name right in here. But the stored record type and range have reverted back to kind of like the default, which is the bibliographic record. Say, for example, we have made a mistake. The easiest way to repopulate your search criteria is to use existing search. Even if you're in the file right now, file 70, and you're performing a new search or redoing the search, you could use existing search to find a current review file that's been completed and import the criteria directly into your review file. So we just did this file search before. You'll notice that as soon as I highlight it with my mouse, all the criteria come up again using the same range and everything, stored record type. We click on use and all that information is repopulated. I can now change my condition to has, and that's all I got to do. So this is a really huge time saver, particularly if you've made a mistake, you've got a huge lengthy list of criteria statements that you've put in. This is a really simple way to just redo the search, change a value, and put it right back in. You can also save the current criteria to the server, and all you have to do is click on save or save as. It really doesn't matter. Put in your name for your review file. I'm sorry, for the save search, and then type in. Usually put in the library name, 2014 CD, DVD. And you can choose to include the record information, which I would probably do in this case because you want that 2014 segment of the database only. And then it will save our range information to that strategy. We'll ask you if you want to save it. Say yes. And then you can run this search if you like. Notice how that cancel button was highlighted here. I could have done that if I wanted to. Now if I go to Save Searches and look at all the way at the bottom of the list, you'll see that there is a new search here. I think we kind of screwed this up. Let's see if I got this right. No, it looks okay. Where it includes the item record information in the search, so the start and stop numbers are the same. But all of our criteria have been saved, so if I want to run this search, say later in December, get a list of all my DVDs and CDs for 2014, I can run that search real easy. And along with save searches, you can save your sorts. You can save lists, which there's not a whole lot of folks that are doing it. But you can also save exports, and we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. But all of that information can be saved to the server and then ran back at a later time. If you wanted to sort your records, for example, I've got two types of mat types here, but they may be interfiled, one right next to the other. If I want to sort them by mat type, all I'd have to do is highlight the review file, click on the sort button, and then I can use fields, the same type of fields I used to create the list in the first place. I could use those to sort as well. So I could use bibliographic mat type, so that'd be the first level sort, so it's going to sort them into two groups, both CDs and DVDs. And then I could do also another secondary sort within those groups and then put in a sort for title. So if we run this, we'll have two groups, one for CDs, one for DVDs, and then within each group, for example, DVDs, we'll have that group will be sorted by title. So we'll go ahead and click on sort, and we'll give this just a second or two to complete. It shouldn't take too long because it's a fairly short file. One of the things I noticed with Sierra is sometimes the exporting in particular can take a long time, but they've fixed issues that they've had in the past with Sierra with sorting, so that should be okay. So if we look at the records now, we'll just show the records. You'll see all of my CDs now are in alphabetical order. All the way down. And you can see the applications for your own uses if you have a list that you need to sort. And then starting with this record here, record 241, we start looking at DVDs, Oak Creek DVDs added since the beginning of the year. And you can see all that's sorted alphabetically as well. One of the things I wanted to show you as well is if you're looking at your review file right here, there are commands that you can use. For example, I'm not interested in this second record here, 5 seconds of summer. It's not really what I wanted to see. I can remove that item from the list. And then it's just removed from my list for consideration. It's useful sometimes when you're going through a list of items. Say, for example, you're setting up a review file for deletion of records from the database. You probably want to go through that review file and make sure that that's something you want to delete. Otherwise, you just use the remove icon here to remove stuff you want to keep. That's one example of how you would use that. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about was since we've got our review file now, this is something this is the list that we want to work with. Now, what do we need to do to get the information out of the database? And there's a number of different things you can do to make this easier for yourself. First of all, in order to export the information, you need to highlight the file and then click on the Export Records button at the top. This is the first step in exporting the data out to Excel. You'll notice that this window looks very similar to what the one that you just used for sorting. It's the same principle here. And in both cases, sorting and exporting, you're limited in the type of data that you can use for the export by this law of one hop. So if we double click on this, oh, maybe I don't have this correct. Yes, there isn't that list here. That probably should be limited to bibs, items, and patrons. In any case, what we need to do here is export the type of information we're after. So if we do, for example, a title, bibliographic title, well, actually, let me put in record number. 81 is record number. And you can just envision these rows as basically the columns that are going to appear on your Excel spreadsheet. So we'll add more columns here. Bibliographic record number, bibliographic title, let's see what author information. So we'll do item barcode is B. And we could also do item call number. Just maybe get a shelf list of some sort that you wanted to take a look at. Since these are already sorted by mat type and title, that's how they're going to be exported as well. It's just basically taking that information. But you can also do the sorts after the fact as well. Excel's pretty good at that. So This other information here, you don't generally have to change. This is basically configuring how the file is going to be constructed. So by field delimiter, they mean the character used to separate each of these, the data in each of these columns. So the record number, title, barcode, call number, it's going to put a comma, in this case, between each of those fields so Excel knows what to do with it. And that's a pretty good one to stick with. All of these defaults, you probably just want to keep it as is. The only exception might be the field delimiter. You can change that by clicking on field delimiter and then changing the control character to something that might work with your system better. So most people keep it as comma, and that's just fine. You can use a control character, and these are ASCII control characters, the most common of which is the tab delimiter. You'll notice that Excel sees tab as a very common delimiter. So you just type in the the number 9, and that you can use to delimit, put a tab between each of these pieces of information. And then it will, at the end of the line, it knows what to do with it, so it knows that each row is distinct. I'm going to change this back to comma because I want to show you something that's really useful. So this is the default. In order for it to create a file, external file with all this data, we're going to click on the Browse button here, and then we're going to save it somewhere on our workstation. So this is the file system for my local PC. So by default, it's going to save it as a text file, but I can make this a lot simpler for everyone by doing this. So we'll just put in, call our, name our file, 14 CD DVDs. But instead of files of type text, I'm going to change this to all files. And then I'm going to put in a file extension of CSV. CSV stands for comma separated values. And Excel knows how to read comma separated values fairly easily. And it basically puts that data into the correct rows and columns right off the bat without having to do a fancy export process or import process. So all you got to do is change this to all files, put the .csv at the end of your file name, click on Save, and you'll see that it appears here. Just take note of where this file is located because sometimes it can be easy to lose where that file ends up. Generally you want to put it in Downloads or My Documents, but we're just going to put it in the C directory right now. So my file's all ready to go. All I have to do is click OK. I can save this export if this is something you're doing on a regular basis, just like you would do with a saved search. Or you can import a previously saved export into this window and then save yourself a lot of time in the future. But just so you know that those are options for you. Once I click OK, it's going to export the records to the file. It's creating the file right now. And this will take a little bit of time depending on the size of your file. Ours is fairly small, so I'm not, and it just finished right now. So everything is working pretty well with that. 1,160 records exported with all 4 of those columns. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find that file. I'm going to go into my file system on my PC here. Hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to find the C drive. And I'm going to do a date modified so I can find this thing. So I've looked for this file here, found it. It's the latest one modified. You'll notice that it's got, kind of hard to see here, but it's got an icon attached to it with an Excel logo on it. And that means Excel's pretty much able to work with it right off the bat. So if I double click on this file, it's going to open up Excel. Hopefully you have something similar to this. And it's going to open up the information right into Excel with all the columns ready to go. You'll notice that not everything's right straight out of the box ready to go. You need to format these columns a little bit. Usually just select all 4 columns, make sure your cursor looks like this, and then double click, and then you should be able to look at that data. Actually, let's see, we'll do this one. Oops. You can see how well versed I am in Excel here. We're going to kind of move these around a little bit. This barcode, you'll see these numbers on occasion. It's because it should have been imported as a number, and it is here. We just changed it from general up here to number format, and it has the correct barcodes included here. To get rid of the decimal point, I'm just going to use these buttons here at the top, hit it twice to get rid of the decimal point, and then you've got a pretty good list here. So once you've got it here, you can see that the items have sorted in the correct order that we had previously done. And then I can start working with this data any way I want to. Once I've got it in Excel, this one's good for maybe like a printout, maybe a shelf list, something that you can work with, give to someone in your library to work with. You can also, if you're working with numbers, for example, checkout numbers, you can start then using things like pivot tables, other pieces of Excel that you can then work with the data once you've got it in here. Getting into Excel is really the only thing I really wanted to cover here. But if you have questions about working with the data once you have it, or you need a certain report, I've dealt with that many times, so that's what I'm kind of here for you guys, is to help you with those reports that you're trying to make. If you're not seeing the data correctly, you want to get different data out of the system, I can definitely help you out with that. I've got a lot of experience working with that. Okay, last thing I wanted to cover really before we get into some of the exercises was, let's see here, the master list. The MCFLS master lists are things that MCFLS put, these are crate lists or review files that MCFLS puts together to save you some time in doing your weekly kind of cleanup tasks. A perfect example of that is the CAFLAG J list that Kate Stratner puts together every Friday. And it basically is a master list of all the CAFLAG J bibliographic records that you can use, and run a sublist off of that review file to find your own library items. That's basically the common thread you'll see with the MCFLS master list. It was originally meant to save you time. Again, when the database took like half a day to search from point A to point B, these master lists were incredibly important to save you time, so you weren't having to do an entire database search all at once. So, but they still come in handy for particular areas like the CAFLAG J list. That's a fairly simple list. Let's just take a look at that one. Here's another trick too. If you're ever looking to find the name of a review file, all of these headers are sortable. So if I'm looking for my CAFLAG J list, I can click on the name column, and I will find the CAFLAG J list. So here it is. It's file 83, CAFLAG J master list. If we look at show info, it's a pretty simple list. It's looking at the entire bibliographic record range and just finding cat flags that are equal to J. These are important for the database maintenance members to locate, find their J records, and then respond with information that MPL tech processing needs to overlay the item. That's a simple one. A more complex version, a couple more complex versions are the stale holds list. That is in file 82. If we take a look at show info for that one, you can see how complex these lists tend to get. It's kind of hard to see this one all at once. But to break it down, we're basically looking at anything with a stats equal to check shelves or in transit, and with item holds that have not been addressed in over 2 weeks. So they have to be, basically the item holds have to be 2 weeks or older and sitting on items that are available. And that's the definition of a stale hold. The hold hasn't been filled for whatever reason. And the same goes, we're connecting it to a set of statements that would identify bibliographic holds that have not been addressed either. So between the two, we're putting them all into one set of criteria that's using a stored record type of item. So I don't care what other items are on this bib. If there are bib holds and there's at least one attached item that's available or in transit and hasn't been addressed for over 2 weeks, then it's going to fall into this category, and it's going to be part of this stale holds master list that you can then, for example, let's just kind of run a sublist off of this, just to give me an example. So if I wanted to find my stale holds for, let's just pick somebody who wasn't here, for Greendale, I'm sorry, this is a common thing. You want to find an empty review file, probably something smaller than that. Search records, and we'll do Greendale stale holds. Good. My stored record type is going to be item, because that's basically what I'm working with are the stale holds. These are all item records. My range then is going to, instead of looking at the entire database, we're just going to look at the MCFLS stale holds report. We're going to search off of that. In order to do that, we have to wade through these review files. It's one of the things that Sierra is going to be changing with. They're actually going to have numbers, the actual review file numbers, next to each one of these review files in the very near future. I'm hopeful next spring. But for now, the best way to wade through these review files to find yours is to know what letter the review file starts with and just keep hitting it. So mine starts with M for MCFLS stale holds. I just hit M, M, M. There it is. So my search is using this as the basis. So it's got 302 items. If I'm looking for Greendale items off that are included in that list, what I have to do is the item record, looking at the location field, item location field, has 16. And that's all I have to do to find my Greendale items that are part of that list. That's basically what you're doing in almost every master list situation. It's just searching for your items off of that list. We click on search, and I end up with 2 stale holds. So if we take a look at that list, see if this actually works. There's a Greendale item. Now it's on the hold shelf. At the time that we put the list together last week, Friday, this probably was check shelves, but or in transit. But now it's on hold shelf. So this isn't a real good example. And this one is actually en route. So this doesn't have, these are 2 items that are actually legit, or actually have been checked out. So they're no longer correct in terms of what's actually with these files. So, and that's actually a good lesson here, because when you create these files, this was created last week Friday. You create that file at the time, and it's collecting the information at the time and it's created, but it doesn't update it after the file is created. So the minute I create that file and it's in there, someone could be changing the status, someone could be actually filling that hold. It's not a dynamic list of records. It's a static list of records at the time that you create it. So there could be changes going on in the background with these records as you see right here in the Greendale list. So if we do others, lists, we could do one for any other library, and probably would show up with a couple of these stale holds. But the idea here is to actually address those. It's not surprising some of these are already done. Another example of empty this file here. Another example of a MCFLS master list, one that is used quite often, is the master no cert 5-year. We just created that at the first of the month. What this looks at is items that haven't circed in 5 years or have never circed. and are at least 5 years old. If we look at show info for this file, it's very complex. There's a lot of going on here, but you'll notice that our fields use some of the things that we've talked about here. Last check-in between 1/1/91 and 10/13/09. It's looking at everything that hasn't circed in over 5 years. If it has a date like this, it means it hasn't circed since then. You'll also notice that we're using between instead of less than. It's one of those examples where the date, if I use last check-in less than 10/31/2009, it's not going to work. And a lot of these other items are in here because this one in particular is in here because the file would get too large if we included everything within Milwaukee Central. But a lot of this is trial and error. You know, you get to the point where, okay, I know why these records were included. Let's redo the search, try it over again, make sure that we have a solid, file to work with. A lot of it's just a lot of trial and error and getting used to how the system works, how the computer logic works. Okay, so those are some MCFLS master files. The other one that I didn't really touch on here, but just wanted to show you was file 80, which is something I think many of you have probably seen or gotten emails about, which is the long overdue items due before 11/1/13. This is a little bit interesting because, first of all, if we do show info on this one, you notice that my MCFLS master list is also actually searched off of a different list. So it's like a sublist off of a sublist is basically what you end up with when you're looking for your overdue items. So this one's looking at the overdue items system file. This is a system file that's generated every morning, and it basically shows all the overdue items in the system. Anything that's overdue gets collected in this list overnight, and then we can use this file to search off of it. So in this case, we're looking at every due date, every item with a due date between 1/1/91 and 10/31/13. So everything overdue and at least overdue by a year. So this would be good candidates for removal or examination. And a lot of libraries use this list to manage their missing lists and get those off the system or reorder them. You can see that's kind of interesting. You're using one list and a sublist off of that one. So it just goes to show how flexible the system is. If you want to get that information out, you can. Okay, hopefully you're still there. Does anyone have any questions at this point? You can put it in the chat area, or you can also just use your microphone or telephone if you have that available. It looks like everyone's got a microphone. If you want to put it in the chat, feel free. Otherwise, you can just use your mic. So if you have any questions, we can address them now, or we can move on to the exercises. Okay, we can address any questions that you have at the end, or if you just want to voice them at any point, just speak up and we can take care of them. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I think we'll just end up a little bit early today, was some exercises. I wanted to show you some of the practical applications you can use with great lists, some of the more common ones. And you'll notice again, if we go back to this website here, there are a number of examples that came up from previous sessions going back probably about 7 or 8 years. Very common ones, so perhaps you can use this type of information. Any of these examples, if you click on them, actually have a working example with a screenshot that you can use for your purposes if it works with the type of list you're trying to create. Otherwise, you can contact me, and I've done this before. Give you the criteria statement they use, and then you can save it on the server and just use it from that point forward. So let's go back to the list here. Oops. So the first example that I wanted to use was one thing that comes up on occasion. It doesn't come up that often, but on occasion you'll see someone has complained that they're getting calls through teleforms for pickup of material, but they don't have a library card or they're not a member of our system. In this case, since the phone number is not indexed, you have to put a review file criteria statement together to find that phone number. And I think, as we mentioned before, I'm just going to copy this here. The easiest way to do this is to use the browse query. So we're going to move off of create list using the same statement pretty much. I'm going to go to the catalog function, go to tools and browse query. And what we're going to do here, since we're going to be looking at patron record information, we're going to change the start record type to patron. And because this is a common issue that comes up on occasion, we've actually got a saved query already set up for this. So in order to retrieve it, you want to click on this button. And even though it's not a create list, you can still use create list criteria in it. What I tend to do in order to find this is to click on the query name column. It will sort by name. And then I can scroll down and find the one called patron phone search. And you'll notice that as soon as I click on that, my number or my criteria statement populate in the window above here. If I select that, now I can change. For example, your number is obviously not going to be 555-5555. It's going to be a legit number. But you can just click on your cursor, change the number here, whatever you want to use, and once you've included all the numbers, variations thereof without the dash or with the dash, it's looking at the telephone field or telephone to field to find that information. And all these are ORed together. You want to make sure that that's the case, because if you AND it together, it's never going to find it. So if we click on search here, we now have 3 records, including my own, from the database. So if we double click on that, it will show up, and you'll see my patron phone number includes 555-5555. So I'm the culprit, and you can blame me. And probably change my telephone number and tell me to re-register a card or whatever it is that you would do. Notice that it didn't matter that my area code was 414 because I used, we'll go back to our browse query here. Phone search. You'll notice that my condition was has. If it was equals, I would have never have found it because it was not equal to this. It just had to have that sequence of 7 numbers. So you can use that with both 262 and 414 area codes if that's what you're after. Has is really important. Using equals just limits your search way too much, and it causes errors in your search results. Okay, so that's basically that. One example. The second example that I had was, how do I create a list of items at Wauwatosa that are 5 weeks overdue and get information on the item and the patron who checked them out? So in this case, you can make use of a couple of different things that we've talked about. First off, if we look at the list of examples here, the example that we're citing here is actually one of the examples on the screen that has a screenshot attached to it. So if we click on that item here, what we're going to end up doing is looking at the overdue items file. We're going to use that system created file, and we're going to search against it to find items owned by Wauwatosa and with a due date of between 1/1/91 and October 14th of 2014. So that's going 5 weeks back essentially. Notice how if you just look at the statement, if you just write down what you're searching for, you can almost always break it up into sections that you can use with Create List to find the correct record set. So we're looking for a list of items at Wauwatosa, at least 5 weeks overdue, and then finally, this is going to be a little different here. We're going to export it. We're going to get, so that's basically your review file right there, at least 5 weeks overdue, owned by Wauwatosa. And then we're going to get information on the item, patron who checked the item out, maybe for something like contact list that you want to put together to contact these patrons, make sure that they know the item's overdue. Could be something that simple. But this is what our statement's going to look like. We're going to limit the item location to Wauwatosa. And then we're going to, first of all, going to use the review file overdue items. We're searching against that overdue items file to kind of limit the number of records we have to look through. And then we're going to look at the item location. Has to have 34. Notice it's not equal. And then item due date between 1/1/91 and 10/14/2014. So that due date needs to use that range field again, because that's how Sierra is going to work. So if we use that search, say we get a couple thousand items, something like that. After searching, you can sort the list by patron record number and export the information for whatever you want to do it with. So if you needed the name, address, title of the item, that's how your sort screen would look, putting that together. And notice at the very end here where it says browse, we put in that .csv file extension that will allow Excel to open it up immediately, so you don't have to do a fancy import process. So it seems like a lot more work than it actually is. I think once you get to the sense or the practice of thinking about how Create List works, the easier this type of thing gets. The problem is, with people holding so many different responsibilities within libraries, it's one of those things that just, unless you do it often and in a lot of quantity, you're not going to remember it. So you don't have to, because you've got this file here that will give you a basic walkthrough about creating a list, and then you've got all of these different resources here, so you don't have to remember to do that necessarily. You have to remember all the things we've talked about. Before we wrap it up, I wanted to give you some information about some further training that you may be interested in taking. The one is we have a training session for advanced Create Lists that you may want to attend, and especially for those of you who are doing database maintenance work. You may find it interesting to work with. We're going to be talking a lot about, this is going to be December 2nd from, let's see here, 1 to 4 o'clock. Also going to be online via GoToMeeting. If you need the link for that, you can talk to your director. They should have it. And we're going to be covering a lot of things we weren't able to cover today, as well as dealing with regular expressions, which is a really cool thing that Create Lists allows you to do. Get a lot more granularity out of Create Lists than you'd normally be able to do. And lastly, we have a session coming up in March that I'm really excited about. It's called Introduction to Sierra SQL Reports, and you'll get further information on that coming out, but that's going to be an in-person training here at MCFLS. But this will allow you, once you've completed the course, will give you access to the SQL backend, which gives you all kinds of reporting options. It's actually going in on the back end and looking at the database of Sierra, and allows you to extract all kinds of information you wouldn't be able to get even with Create Lists. So just so you know, that one is going to be in March, and we'll have sign-up information about a month or 3 weeks ahead of time. So that's all I have. Are there any other questions or any topics that you'd like to address? You can just use your mic or the chat room at the very bottom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. However, if at some point something comes up and you have questions either about the information I've sent you, or you have your own list that you're struggling to work with, feel free to just contact me. Hopefully everyone has my contact info at this point. And we'll work it out. So I appreciate your time today, and hopefully you got something out of it, some of the new stuff that we talked about. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll see you soon, I hope. Thank you.